Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. I'm glad you're here. This week, our guest is Jake Clopton of Clopton Capital and several other associated companies, which all grew from his interest in debt and capital, and how at the time he started his company, it wasn't as easy to secure it, and he wanted to make it easier. So this episode is about multifamily real estate, commercial real estate, and understanding the cost of capital and tailored solutions. Let's go. This is episode 176 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Jake Clopton. Jake founded Clopton Capital in 2009 as a way for property owners and operators to efficiently access both debt and JV equity for commercial properties. He also owns Clopton Insurance Services and multiple apartment communities in the Chicagoland area, as well as a few other things that we may talk about. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk to you and get your background. But I know something interesting about you. You started in real estate with actually no background in it at all. How did you end up thinking real estate was going to play a role in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was always interested in real estate, but it really came about. I used to trade interbank hedging product futures, and then around, like 2008-9 era, like the credit crisis.
Yeah.
I didn't have a background in banking or anything like that. I mean, I traded like banking products, but not in retail commercial banking.
Right.
But my idea was like, hey, there's a credit crisis. People can't find money in loans. Let me start a company that's based around finding people loans and money, but on the commercial side, not residential. I never really wanted to do anything, consumer.
Yeah. Well, how come though? Because I think that can probably help people understand from your point of view, starting a company where debt's going to be an issue. Why did you think commercial was going to be a safer bet and more interesting for you?
Well, it wasn't necessarily like a safer bet, but if you remember back in the day during that crisis, there was like the residential collapse. And then everybody was talking about that, hey, there's going to be this commercial collapse, right? And all these business loans are coming due. So that's why, my idea was kind of like get in ahead of that. There really wasn't a commercial collapse, but, it still was the beginning of, us starting, an intermediary for financing for commercial loans really at the time. And back in the day, we were doing like business loans. And I remember even doing like some semi-truck financing, stuff like that. But really just the commercial real estate space really just took over. It made a lot more sense, and I liked it. The people that were in it were very entrepreneurial, and it was a great fit. So it very, very quickly turned into that. Now here we are 15-ish years later, man. And not only are we capital markets, but we've got a ton of other services as well.
Yeah, but it must be an interesting corollary to when you started thinking that everyone was saying, hey, commercial is going to collapse. And now we're in a very odd time, I would say, for commercial, which I think is rounding out. But in large scale commercial, how has it looked to you over the last year with a lot of people who took, I guess, adjusted finance loans that are coming due?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of like to split up the market between like the people that are stuck in these adjustable rate, high leverage loans, and then just the rest of the commercial real estate market. Because even think about the properties that those loans are on, right? Those properties are actually okay, fine. A lot of them are like 100% occupied or, we're close to it and they're stabilized. It's just, some of the assumptions they thought, didn't work out or, they were priced to perfection, meaning that like, this loan was only going to work out if the cost of capital stayed right where it was, and then you were able to get out at that time. And really, I think a lot of that just came from a lot of people that were entrants into the real estate market had never they've never experienced a rate rising environment. I don't know if they just didn't get it, or they just didn't think it was possible, right? Maybe like, hey, the Fed is just stuck in low rates and they can't raise them.
Yeah.
But here we are, it happened, and a lot of them are stuck now. So, I mean, but at the end of the day, like, I don't see, and most of this is in multifamily, like smaller syndicators, stuff like that, in multifamily that get stuck in some of these deals. Again, the demographics of housing and multifamily are perfectly fine. I mean, if anything, they're still great investments. And it's not the properties themselves, it's how they were capitalized. That's the issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a really good point, too, because I think everybody, they like to talk doom and gloom on the news, but the truth is the assets are great. Like you said, a lot of these are 95, 100% rented, but people think all of a sudden there's a multifamily collapse. The asset's great.
Yeah, I mean,
they just have bad debt.
Just because you overpaid doesn't mean there's something wrong with the property. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think, I think it was there are definitely a lot of inexperienced operators who saw the light with low rates to get in, kind of baby syndicators who didn't really know what they were doing. But I've also seen kind of a little bit of operators who I guess were stretched out a little too much, and maybe their operations weren't as good. So they just kept buying, but they didn't really pay attention to the debt that they were buying on because they just assumed they'd keep running the machine. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah. I mean, just saying people that just grew a little too fast and.
Yeah. Like, hey, this last one went well. Let's do it again. So they kind of stopped. The asset was good, like you said. They focused like, hey, good asset, but they stopped worrying about the debt. So they would take on an adjustable debt, whereas the other ones were fixed because they thought they were going to stay hot, I guess.
Yeah, or they just got enticed by like a really low adjustable interest rate.
Yeah, and
didn't fix it and didn't think it was necessary, and then it just. That risk reward, equation didn't work out the way they thought it was going to.
Yeah.
I mean, the syndicators took a lot of these. And, the issue with syndicators a lot of time is, well, just by nature, right? They're raising investment capital and, they don't really have the money to come in with themselves to pay it down if needed, the debt that is. So it's got to come from somewhere. And that's why a lot of these are stuck, right? They go to capital calls for investors. It's like, the investor put in more money. Oh, by the way, you have to put in more money and your returns are going to go down.
Exactly.
So that can get really challenging, right? And that's why so many of these are like, I think a lot of lenders that are in this space that are stuck with a lot of these loans have just pushed them out and extended them just to let these guys try to figure it out. Right. I mean, eventually something's going to happen. Either the economics of the property are going to push it up to the point where they can refinance, the cost of capital is going to come down, and or they're going to come in with more money.
Yeah.
Or they're going to have to sell. I think a lot of them are just going to sell.
Yeah, there was a really good point inside that, because you talked about them not having enough money, so they're coming for capital calls. Me personally, I just started investing in syndications last year at 52, and one of the first questions I ask is how much skin is in the game, with them. And as long as they have a decent amount of skin in the game, and I see that there's other funds there, that makes me comfortable to know that like the ship's going with both of them. I don't want to get a capital call.
That's a good point, because I think the point for me when I started to realize like, okay, there's really an issue here is, before rates started going up and I would see syndications going off and, it would be like, oh, we're doing a 90-10, right? So 90% investor capital and 10% syndicator, joint partner. But then once you really dug into it and understood how much money was actually staying in the deal, right? Like the syndicators ended up with none.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it was just netted out through acquisition fees and this fee, that fee, the fee fees. And, it's just, and then, I was like, wait a second, you guys have no money in this thing at all. So that seemed, a little pushed, and where I started to realize like, all right, man, the leverage on these things is extremely high.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back a little. In 2009, when you started Clopton Capital, had you been investing in real estate, or did you start after that?
No, after that. Actually, the first real estate investment I personally made was in 2014.
Oh, okay. All right. What was that? Yeah. So you still worked on the business for a while before you got into real estate yourself. That's kind of interesting too.
Yes. I didn't want to invest in something that I didn't really know a lot about. And, it took a couple of years of really, being in our business and really understanding debt and the finance side works. And then, what constitutes a great investment. And I learned so much just from my own clients, right? So I looked at, I don't even know. how many loans at this
point? Right. Yeah. I feel that way about the podcast, though.
Too many loans, Jonathan.
Yeah, I know. I was saying, like, like I can have you on the show or have somebody else on the show. And even though I've been in it 30 years, I come away with every episode learning something new. You did the same thing. You're like, well, okay, I'm seeing all of these loans coming in for my clients, evaluating the properties. It gave you probably 5 years of great access to decide what asset class you wanted to start at and what looked good for you.
Yeah. I mean, that speaking of, like learning something new, always it's a good point, because even 15 years in, I'm still to this day, I've got to be every week. I learn about a new strategy,
Me too.
Different property type, right? And I mean, it's our business is interesting because whatever private equity ends up chasing, right, for yield, ends up being a lot of what I end up doing, right? And it was, let's go back years ago, storage. I mean, storage is huge, right? But that's when private equity started chasing. And now it's car washes. The money's pouring into car washes. I'm doing a lot of those. So, it's always something new and interesting. And there's just a million ways to create this math problem that is commercial real estate investing. So, I mean, every week I learn a different strategy.
Yeah, same. And I think that good investors and people who are in capital markets and researching debt are just always on their game every day, because you want to be ahead of the curve when something changes. And as even you said, you're kind of trying to see what happens before it happens, so you can give better access and understand the markets better.
You got to take every phone call, man. I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh God, but like honestly, so many meetings and calls that I'll take, and maybe I didn't really think anything was going to come out at first. I learned something really great, or it was a phenomenal opportunity. So you definitely got to take every call.
Yeah. So what was the first asset class that you decided to invest in?
Multifamily, apartment building.
Yeah. Small scale?
The first one was 20 units. So,
oh, wow. I mean, you had the 5 years of lending experience, but still 20 units to bite off on a first one is a lot. So were you worried about the management aspect of that, or did you feel like you had learned enough?
No, I mean, we did third-party management, so that took a lot of the heavy lifting off, right? I mean, it's hard to run the business that I run, but also, day-to-day management apartment building. It was just an interesting asset. So, right. So I was here in Chicago, and it was in a town called Cicero. And at the time, Chase Bank was like one of the most competitive lenders around here. Right. And I had a lot of great lending contacts. And before I invested in that property, that bank had kind of like, they just wouldn't go into that neighborhood. The bank was a very up and coming neighborhood until I found this building, and it was phenomenal. And I remember bringing the guy from Chase out there, and I was like, listen, you guys should be investing in this neighborhood and lending here, because the economics here are phenomenal. Blue class, working class kind of neighborhood. Everything was stable. Before, the neighborhood was kind of known as like a rough type of neighborhood, but it's really been turned around. And I convinced the bank to open up that neighborhood for lending. I was their first loan they did there. And after that, I mean, and this is an interesting phenomenon in real estate, right? Like, as soon as a competitive, like low cost of capital lender goes in that area, you tend to see cap rate compression, right? Because you get more investors going in there. And that's exactly what happened. Nothing else changed about the neighborhood, but now like more competitive lending was going in. And that really helps just almost immediately start pushing down cap rates and up values.
Yeah, I mean, being the first in really helps. But that's something specific to larger cities, especially Chicago. There were or still are a lot of areas where banks are like, that's just a hard no for that area. But they're not going out there. They're sitting behind a computer.
Market research. They don't send a sales guy out there to like walk the neighborhood,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that must have worked out well for you. But has that played a role? I mean, Chicago is a very interesting market, because I know better Philadelphia because I'm closer to Philadelphia. And I always describe it as like completely block by block. You can succeed on one block and go around the corner and completely fail. I know Chicago is similar, but in multifamily, it's even more important to understand the dynamics of what's going on around there. Have you seen that? I mean, Chicago is a great market. I mean, I always see it as a success market, but you have to know it very well, I think, to do well in the area. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it is definitely. It's a big city, right? Like Philly, right? And it's definitely one of those cities where, right here may be a great place to live, work, and invest. But then 50 feet that way, nope, nobody will go there. So it's the exact same thing. And if you don't, one of the reasons why it's so difficult for people that are outside this market to invest into it is because if you don't know those markets and you can't actually go and walk that, that corner, you don't really know if that's a bad corner or a good corner. I mean, it might actually be a really nice neighborhood, but this is the corner everybody knows not to go near. So yes, very much so. It's a local investors market, and it just like Philly, right? I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I think people, they rely on the internet too much. So they're like, "Oh, I looked at Google Maps and it didn't look good." It's like, well, that was 3 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and P.S. there were just 3 people outside, so they could have just been walking by. Like, what are you judging it on? It's a static picture of 3 years of time.
No, I mean, it's, when cities like this, like those corners are like organisms. I mean, you have to go, you got to go stand there and look around and really know what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what was your plan with the 20 units for your first investment? Were you planning on doing value add, or was it just a good asset to acquire based on what you knew?
No, it was just a great asset. It was just a really, and that's, again, I don't want to run too many races, right? Like doing a value add project and all that wasn't really what I was planning on taking on. Because I mean, my entire, income and business is based around real estate.
Yeah.
So, and I need to run that race, right? I don't want to run too many races at the same time and like not do too many things and not any of them exceptionally well.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So really need to focus on that. And then, taking on a value add project, I mean, that's so execution, dependent and just not really what I was after. So it was just a really good stabilized deal that was at a great basis. And, that building actually just sold it earlier this year. Was just a phenomenal, stable cash flow generator for a very long time.
Yeah, I asked because I think a lot of people are looking for value add, but they have no idea how to do value add. So they're really going to sink themselves, as you said, into something that they're never going to be able to complete. Whereas stabilized assets, of course, you're going to pay more than a value add asset, but you're going to have limited capex. Like it's good to go. Like the rents are coming in right away. They're just going to be, less than the crazy pro forma that you have to spend $3 million to get.
Yeah, well, that's what I try to tell people, man. Listen, this is, these are operating businesses. Even like the apartment building, it's an operating business.
Yeah.
And if your main business isn't operating real estate, like just be careful with how you're operating, right? Like, I mean, I have, some of the guys I've seen get in trouble are like, I'm a veterinarian, but I'm going to do a value add 50 unit apartment building.
That's exactly who I'm said that for, because that's what scares me. And maybe that's part of where there's some, odd debt, because that's a crazy thing to bite off. Apartments are, you'll appreciate this. People are saying like, oh no, I'm just trying to get some passive income. I'm going to buy a 20 unit building and manage it myself. And you're like, you just took on like a second and third job. You're never going to be free.
Man, it's like flying a plane, right? Like as long as everything's going fine, the autopilot's great. But as soon as, and this happened to me, some guy gets mad at his girlfriend and kicks the window in and torches the apartment. All of a sudden, you've got a second job. So,
right. And that can happen in the dead of winter or with no notice, and you can't be free of it.
I'll tell you exactly what happens. It's always at like 11 o'clock on a Friday night.
Or a holiday. Yeah, holiday.
Or a holiday. Oh my God, yeah. Yes, exactly. If you've ever been in real estate, you know the anxiety of going into holidays. It's like, oh God, I know something's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with a dad who was an investor and managed all his own properties, so it was very not unusual to get. He's like, I got to go somewhere on Christmas morning. There's a plumbing leak, which he was going to go like patch with gum, because this was the old school days. So that's just what you did. So, in terms of your own personal portfolio, how did you grow from there, and what was your idea about? Because I know you're focused on your business, and it seems like you want to keep these as well-performing assets and didn't want to really overdo the real estate part, but I know you've added more to the mix. And
so we did over time, and actually I'm on the downslope of that because I'm trying to be more focused on the business side of what I do. And again, I look at these like operating assets, and they take a lot of attention and time away from other things, right? And recently, over the past couple of years, we used to only be capital markets, but over the past couple of years, I've added 4 different business lines, and it's gotten to the point where I'm, really I started thinking like, hey, I'm gonna, kind of unwind the direct property ownership stuff, because that's a whole separate job, and really focus on building out all the commercial real estate services. And then over the past, since COVID-ish times, right, we've added the insurance company, we added the real estate brokerage this year, the qualified intermediary last year, and then solar last year. And then we're building out a residential solar side right now. And, it just, once you kind of build this machine and, have that operating, it's all the same people, right? I mean, it's all the same operators, the same industry participants. So you can start building them on. But, each time I do that, it does take a little bit more time away. And, I've got to focus on that. And that's why, kind of divesting away from the direct property ownership works. And over the years, we built up, I acquired 2 more buildings and, those have also been great. Those were actually a little bit more value add. I was able to go into some buildings, identify like a lot of energy efficiency stuff and use state and local government programs to get a lot of free, stuff from them. And, those are 2 more buildings that I'm probably going to divest in the next year. And then, it's really focusing on, the commercial real estate services company from that point forward.
Yeah, I think that's important. I guess the social media world and the new investor world has an obsession with how many doors everybody owns. But I sold off a ton of stuff during the pandemic as well. So someone would ask me, how many doors do you own? As if that would count my experience in the business. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea how many doors I own. It depends how you qualify a door. So knowing though that you've ran through those buildings, that all adds to the businesses that you're building now, right?
Sure, absolutely. Having the experience and the perspective of the direct property ownership side and what we're doing is definitely a huge advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. So the diversification is definitely important for your business too, because it kind of works as a trickle down because these businesses are all kind of work in tandem. They can all work together to create, hybrids of people using all parts of the company, right?
Yeah. Many of them are, complementary to each other. The 2 biggest ones are really the finance and insurance side.
Yeah.
Especially right now. And I mean, I'm sure everybody sees what's going on in insurance. These premiums are just out of control, right?
Yeah, it's nuts.
And it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
There was, have you seen what's going on in California? Like there's insurance companies that are just flat out leaving entire states. And the regulatory commission in California just had to approve like a 32% or something increase in premiums. That was like last week. And that's just going to filter through the whole system. And I still think we're kind of at the beginnings of some of this. So, our insurance agency, to be able to work hand in hand with our finance side, I mean, we flat out saved deals.
Yeah.
From finding better policies. And like before, I think a lot of people would just auto renew. You're like, insurance is annoying. I don't really know how it works. And it's going to auto renew it. And, it is what it is. But now, we're getting people that are getting renewal notices 2 days before it comes due and the premiums jumped 150%.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, those are real.
That happened with my car insurance. I was like, "Are you insane? Like, that's not." It doesn't make sense. And I think that being involved in insurance is so important because that actually plays a huge role in acquisitions, and that people who aren't paying attention to their insurance costs, especially the more units you have, like that's where a lot of people are stuck. Their insurance costs went up. Maybe their debt was okay in the beginning. But it was still adjustable. Then they have the adjustables coming due. And then the insurance went up 50, 60%. Like they're slow. There's nothing you can do.
That's real money. Well, back, in the teens, you just used a pro forma model 3%.
Right.
On everything.
Can't do it anymore.
No. And it's really difficult to model that stuff right now because you just don't really know. But I mean, insurance, these expense line items are becoming, huge issues.
Yeah.
That's why, we got into some of the areas like commercial solar, and insurance. I mean, there's 2 sides to a P&L, right? And that's real money. And I mean, and we're at the point now where some of these expenses are getting so large. I mean, they're really affecting property values.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can, cut, let's say like $100,000 policy in half, I mean, that equates to real value in property.
Yeah. Are you seeing the big difference in the insurance industry now with your company, just kind of, I guess, weather related? To me, like looking now, I'm very weather, I guess, more attentive than I used to be, just because I see premiums going up. I mean, they're going up in other areas where, maybe it's like a tornado issue or something. Texas, California, and Florida are the ones that come to mind. But is that an issue in the insurance industry?
I think there's several factors that play into it. Weather, for sure. I mean, I'm not here to debate climate change, but it's crazier weather. So, more claims, basically. I mean, the other thing is just, the cost of repairing properties, just,
great point.
Has gone up. And right. So like, I mean, that's the other side of the equation with insurance too, right? I mean, they got to pay out the amount of cost to fix it. And that has just gone up so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a tough cycle. Because I think if insurance rates go up, then it almost encourages people to make more claims. Whereas before they're like, my insurance isn't that much. I'll just pay this myself because I don't want to add a claim to it for later.
Well, that's a good point, right? Because the cost to fix some of this stuff used to not be so bad, but now it's
right. It's like double. You're stuck. Like I paid so much for the insurance. Right. Yeah. I don't want to pay this $5,000, to do this, but then the insurance company is going to have to pay, which is eventually going to raise the premium. Yeah. It's tough. It's something definitely that investors need to pay attention and need to have somebody to go to in the beginning, and not, like you said, just like, not necessarily auto pay an old account, but just say, hey, like I'll just take whatever insurance you have. It's a big deal that could really take over 100%. An investment.
I think a lot of people, thought like, oh, I just get like an insurance guy and, they just take care of it and that's the answer, right? But I mean, before we created the agency, and I brought this on as a joint venture with somebody that was extremely knowledgeable in insurance, right? And I learned a lot more about it years ago. And I mean, it's very much so like the brokering of the capital market side, right? I mean, there's lots of different markets, there's lots of different participants, and there's a lot of different ways to put together these policies. And one group is not necessarily as good as the other. I mean, we've outcompeted many, many large incumbent insurance agencies that have been around for decades because we look at things a little bit differently, or we're actually putting in the work to make sure it goes out to all the markets. I mean, just because X guy is at X place doesn't mean he's actually marketing your policy. And a lot of times, if you're at a larger place, they don't really care so much unless it's like a policy that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So yeah, there's kind of that to think about as well.
Yeah. For somebody who's looking for a larger scale commercial financing and they haven't been able to find anything, what things should they have really in order now? Because it's a different time for commercial financing and there's a lot of vacancy in like retail buildings. For someone who's coming to you guys looking for capital, and a sizable loan, what's something like kind of new that they need to really have buttoned up to make sure that they're, getting the best opportunity from anybody who's lending money?
Yeah, I guess I would say the difference now, right, than before when there was a run up in rates is because, we were living in an era of free money and there was ready, willing, and able capital just all over the place, right?
Yeah. The younger generation thinks like 3% was real, and like all of us are like, that was the best that's ever going to be.
Hey, don't get me wrong. There's a 2.7% interest rate in my house, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that's never happening again.
Yeah, right. But you just can never move. You can't move because it's just too good. It doesn't matter if you're, growing out of it 2 times. It's just too nice.
Exactly. I mean, listen, the difference is I think a lot of people got used to, it was a borrower's market, right? A lot of people got used to you just, put it out there and you would get bids on top of bids on top of bids.
Yeah.
That's just not the way it is anymore, right? I mean, it's a lender's market now to a degree, right? And, they're careful. They're careful about what's going on.
Yeah.
Just the biggest difference is, and candidly, like businesses like ours have gotten so much more valuable because, I'm a service provider at the end of the day. And what we do is we go out and do the grunt work of contacting 200 lenders on every deal, something like that, right? Yeah. And the biggest difference I see between like before and today was before you take something out and almost everybody would bid on it. Today, maybe only 40%, something. Yeah. And half of those just don't even make any sense because, the bank is asking you to put up $3 million in deposits to lend you $6 million.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting phenomenon now. And, you just have to take such a wider netcast approach to anything you're going to do in this market. Because it just takes a lot more work to find the right capital partners.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Jake Clopton. And on this brief interlude, I just want to remind you that I'm going to the Bigger Pockets Conference. It's October 6th to 9th coming up. By the time this comes out, it's only a couple weeks away. So if you're going to BPCon 25 in Cancun, send me a DM, a message somewhere where it's easy to find me. I'm not hard to find on social media or via websites. And let me know that you're going to be there. We'll plan to meet up. I look forward to meeting up with a lot of the guests that I've had on the show over these 106 episodes. And I hope I get to meet you there as well. Let's get back to the show.
Yeah, so at Clopton Capital, who's your ideal client or what's your ideal asset to lend on?
Well, we've been doing this for 15 years. Really, I mean, it's any asset class. It's just we're in the small to middle market space, so we're below institutional, right?
Yeah, right.
And our clients tend to be, like individual owner operators or, small to middle market real estate companies. We work with a lot of, guys that have their own personal portfolios, developers, or real estate companies that we'll work with a lot of acquisition guys at real estate companies, help them scale up. Those guys usually love us too because, they can model out all these different costs directly through our platform.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as asset class, done everything. I'm sure there's something new out there that's coming that we haven't done yet, but we've done every asset class, and we do anything from apartment buildings to car washes. So
yeah,
anything a couple $1 million and up. I think the smallest deal I'm working on right now is like $2 million, and the biggest one I'm working on right now is $150 million total capitalization. So.
Yeah, you are. I mean, you mentioned car washes twice. It's definitely been an interesting ride for it because it was something that I think people used to ignore businesses, as a means. But, you're getting an underlying real estate asset on a lot of these businesses like car washes or things like that. And I think that's what people forget. You're owning a lot of different things when you own a business that runs on real estate. It's 100%. Kind of an interesting thing that people, they're discounting because the car wash, of course, from a lending perspective, you're generally looking at what it's making, or what the future is going to hold. But it's still, there's a good asset underneath that because it's usually in a high traffic area.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, the car wash thing is, a continuation of this trend that started happening, where, private equity is hunting for yield. And in order to, they kind of, these guys kind of engineer like larger deals where there's this concept of aggregating portfolios of smaller properties where you get, let's say you're buying them at 8 caps. But if you put them together to the point where you hit critical mass, you can sell them as a portfolio to institutional investors, and they tend to pay more because they have a cheaper cost of capital, right? So if you put together $100 million portfolio of smaller properties, you tend to get cap rate compression, even if you didn't really do much other than aggregate the portfolio, right? So that's the phenomenon that, I see it happened in mobile home parks, storage, now car washes. So it happens a lot in smaller property types like that.
Yeah, I had Fernando Angelucci on. He's in Chicago, and he aggregates storage. They'll take 2, 3 together and then sell it to the big companies. They'll stabilize them all. It's a smart business model, when you know what you're doing, because those industries, I think you have to be good at. But then it's like, as you said, once big money comes in, it's like almost kicks out. When I was looking for self-storage, we were only focused on mom and pops who owned either just 1 or 2 or 3 because we knew, none of the big guns like hedge funds don't want that crap. They want someone who has a lot more. But that's really like self-storage. It's nice that the kind of spotlight's a little bit off it. I wouldn't say totally off, but I feel like that's an accessible area for your just regular investor now who wants to go up a little. I think there's a little bit more opportunity now than there was, like you said, when they were buying all of them.
Yeah, I mean, storage, I think with storage when done right, absolutely. Great opportunities. I think some of the areas it's gotten a little oversaturated, but there's still a lot of opportunities. So storage is an interesting aspect because it's very like data driven.
Yeah.
And kind of like digital marketing arbitrage, like how much can you pay for leads and customers versus other places. So there's absolutely an operating business. There's more than enough third-party companies you could hire, X-Space to, public to go in and manage these things, but it's definitely an operating business. And I wouldn't say like a passive investment by any means.
No, yeah. I mean, people always, they're always thinking passive investment because I think as a new investor, they come in, they're like, oh, I want to get out of the 9 to 5. I want to just live on a beach in Hawaii. They don't realize like there's really nothing syndications as an LP for me, that's as passive as it gets. I don't do anything. I just read the prospectus in the beginning and every month, and that works for me. But I don't see anything that's even close to like that in terms of passivity. Do you?
No, not really. I mean, until they come, asking for more money.
Yeah. I hope I choose right on the operator.
That too. What have you really done by investing as LP? In a way, you've just hired an operator, a management company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, somebody somewhere is doing the work.
Yeah, I feel, comparatively to like property management, I feel like there's going to be less skimming involved.
Oh, 100%. Even if
you know what I mean? I don't have to oversee anything as an LP, whereas
you still have to oversee those property managers.
Yeah. Oh, always. Because I always say like, if you want multifamily, sure, you can get it to be, quote, passive, but it's not really because you're paying for the passivity. And then if you don't know how to manage the manager, you're losing money.
Like that's a guarantee. 150 units, if you're not watching over what your management does or you're not vertically integrated, you're losing money. And that could be a lot over 3-4 years.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And you got to look at all these. I mean, yeah, I'm like, hey, man, why'd you write a check to yourself? Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stay on those guys for sure.
Is there an asset class right now that you really like as a lender or as an investor, where you're seeing people come in and you're like, wow, the numbers really look good for this in this current economic climate?
That's a good question. Like in this market, it feels like a stock pickers market, right? It's sort of like that mentality. Like there's definitely, certain areas that are really interesting, but I think it's a lot of it's opportunistic.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these scenarios where there's like over levered debt in multifamily, I think that would be, interesting areas to get into. I think some of the guys that are chasing notes out there will probably get some really good deals.
Yeah,
for sure. There's some really interesting land plays also.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I've had a lot of land people on, and every time they come on, we were talking about this before the show ends, and I'm like, damn, that looks easy. Like I got to do this. There's so much opportunity because I live in New Jersey. It's a dense state, so there's basically no land. But when you see the opportunities there, what are you seeing out there that's interesting to you?
Some of the guys that have just figured out like the local government stuff of getting land under contract and getting it rezoned or, doing like brownfield cleanup, stuff like that. Or, I even had one guy that like will just, go in, put it under contract, have basically no money in, and then get it entitled and all this stuff. And, maybe he uses that land lift equity as his equity in the project, or he sells it off. And I mean, some of the returns are just great.
Yeah.
I think he had like $20,000 in earnest money locked up and sold the thing for like $1 million profit.
Yeah, that sounds good. Everybody's like now typing. They're like pulling over in their cars and looking up land investing.
Like I look at some of the stuff and I'm like,
yeah. For me, it's like how much energy is this going to take? Which is why at this age, I'm like syndications make sense. But again, I do a lot of research on the operator and how I know them before going in. And I think that's what people can miss. And in your businesses now, I mean, that's an important part of you building the reputation with the capital company over the years. Because then when you open these other companies, you're bridging that gap, with the same name to trickle down, right? It really helps to have run that.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think if somebody's going to trust me with like, their $10 million loan,
good with insurance.
Look at their insurance policy.
Yeah, but as you said before, because you're integrated like that, you can probably find other things or be a little bit more touched in as opposed to just calling somebody randomly, off of a website to do insurance in California when you have a property in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, commercial real estate, sometimes feels, like a little bit like the Wild West sometimes with the capital market stuff. You'll get, somebody that decided to be like a broker today, right?
Yeah.
So really being like more of an institutional type of company and, having all the licenses and being, knowledgeable about, the different aspects of, the whole deal, that definitely helps.
Yeah. So for you who've been involved in this commercial real estate for so long, what do you think the best options for all of this vacant commercial real estate, these office buildings that are not as easy to be repurposed into residential, or people just think it's easy and that's obviously not that easy? What are we going to do with a decent amount of kind of vacant commercial real estate?
Yeah, I mean, so office right now, like if you can I think that's the best play, right? I mean, people make the most money when there's blood on the streets. There's blood on the streets in office, right? There isn't really any
big time. I mean, it's just sitting there with nothing in it in huge cities. Yeah.
But the challenge with it, and everybody says like, oh, just make them apartment buildings. But if you know the layout,
good luck with the plumbing.
That's some of these are just impossible. You can't do that, right?
Yeah. That's why I think it's interesting because what do you do with it?
I mean, there's different plays that I've seen people. I mean, like maybe some will turn into data centers, right? I mean, there's like a lot of need for that, and they're wired, but you have to get it at the right basis. And I mean, I'm definitely seeing a lot of them sell for very, very low basis.
Yeah, the basis for a data center versus what would be an operating entire office for a large scale law firm is much different.
Oh yeah, I mean the thing's built for computers anyway.
Yeah.
So I think the ones that will get turned into housing will. I've seen a lot of like local government programs have like, money kind of earmarked towards like helping that transition.
Yeah.
But that is not so easy. And that was just the first thing that people said, like, oh, make them that. But like a lot of these you just can't. Other ones, I think data centers are a good play. The ones that are just downtown, I mean, they'll be turned into something, just the proximity to everything else around them, eventually somebody will figure it out. But some of them just got to go, big C-class office building somewhere and, you can't really do anything with it.
You got to knock it down to turn it into housing if it's blocking everything, because I think that's where what I've learned with multiple guests. Like, of course, it just doesn't work. You only have there's not as many, the windows are all in different places. Plumbing's in different places. It's not built for residential. Hotels are a great turnover conversion, but there's a lot of just vacant office buildings, and they're not as just, oh, hey, sure, just turn that into apartments. Great. Nobody's going to have a bathroom. Nobody wants to share a bathroom on the floor like an office building.
Right. I mean, I guess you could make it like a dorm.
Real reduction in value from that, Fifth Avenue office spot.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the whole basis question, right? Like, just because it was worth dollars before does not mean it's worth that now. And some of these things, and I was saying this for a while, because of the dislocation of the labor market, that's where a lot of the work from home stuff, came from. It's because people needed employees and there was 2 job openings for every unemployed person.
Yeah.
And you just had all the power in the hiring process in the hands of employees, right? To be like, all right, well, I'm not going to come work for you unless you work from home.
Yeah.
But that seems to be changing, John. I don't know. You tell me, but it seems like a lot of that's going to change. I mean, that hiring, power will be back in the hands of employer. And I mean, the labor market's still extremely strong, but a lot of the stories I see out there are people not being able to find jobs right now, I guess. I talk to hundreds of people in the real estate industry every day, and I'm starting to see, a lot of people in our industry starting to be looking for work.
Yeah.
And I think employers are going to be able to say, great, get back to the office. And maybe some of that office space comes back. I don't think all of it, right? But
yeah, I actually agree with that a lot, because I think that the pandemic in general and how work was changed after that made a lot of people complacent, as if they should just always be able to. I mean, I like working from home, but I don't work for a company. I work for myself. So I think there is I know companies have tried to push back on it and they want their workers to be at their best, but I do believe businesses may start grassroots growing again, which means you're going to need to be in some type of office environment. Maybe it's not 5 days a week, but as you said, maybe the office actually becomes a little more relevant, because in just the real estate brokerage, it's almost irrelevant now. But I think the brokerages that actually have good offices where people go to, they're probably doing way better, than other brokerages. Cloud brokerages are fine. I work for one, but that's for, to me, experienced agents who you're going to get a lot of digital opportunities, but it's different than, knocking around questions around the water cooler. My first job was at the government. There was literally nothing better than all going to lunch together every day. And that almost doesn't exist now, which I think is going to have to change.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. There's some jobs that just don't need to be in an office. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
They're just, and real estate brokers is a great one, right, man? You need to get together eventually, but 90% of your time, you need to make money in that.
Yeah.
You need to be out showing
exactly.
Profit.
Yeah.
Why waste half a day going back and forth from the office?
Yeah, I agree.
But, there's other, for instance, we don't have an office, right? Everybody's remote. I have 6, 7 guys that are, all over the country.
Yeah, mine's remote. This is my office.
Yeah, exactly. But all my clients are over the country anyway. It's not like I need to be sitting in an office to talk to some guy in Arizona.
Yeah.
But, there's absolutely something that, in a lot of corporate jobs, you're just missing out if you're not there. Right. And I don't know, you only have to see so many Zoom videos out there where they caught some guy that was sleeping in his bed while he's
I was thinking about the guy who's in shorts and a button-down shirt, but gets up to get the door.
Productive after all.
Yeah. No, I always think of it just from a general perspective and what I wear. I literally don't get dressed. This is as dressy as I have got, I ever get, and it's different. I used to wear a suit to work every day, and I wouldn't say I liked it, but at the time I liked it. It was a part of a routine, and that's almost not part of current culture. And commercial real estate is a big part of that, because now what are the offices going to do? No one's getting dressed up and going there. We're all sitting on Zoom in our underwear,
Well, you know what? Commercial real estate guys, again, though, we're all entrepreneurs, right? And I would 90% of the time I talk to somebody, they're out driving to go do something, right? Or, they're working on something, right? And I mean, there's always a hustle. I mean, there's a huge aspect of our industry that, like acquisition guys at real estate companies, or like on the finance side, listen, I talk to somebody in New York, they're in an office with a suit and tie, but the vast majority of the other industry is really not, right? I mean, it's a different culture. I think, real estate is extremely relationship based, and that goes through to like a lot of the way just all the participants operate. But again, when you get into the banking side of it, absolutely. I mean, everybody's got to be in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, have you found over the years just what you said? I mean, relationships, if you, for new investors and even for people who are just kind of like on their way to getting started, if you just focused for your first year on only building relationships and never having an ask for someone or trying to buy a deal, I think you'd be set up forever if you just did 1 year of just honestly trying to build relationships. What do you think about that?
Well, I completely agree, because that's how I got into this business, right? All I did was I sat down and I just made cold calls. I just call people for probably 2 years straight. Just sat there, call anybody, banks, real estate operators, just networking, going and meeting people. And it absolutely is a relationship-based industry. There's no doubt about it. And I mean, some of the people that I've seen build the biggest portfolios and make the most money, their investors were the relationships, right? Friends, family, people they met. So I mean, just that alone right there tell you, like, it's 100% relationship-based business.
Yeah, even more so, though, in commercial real estate, because for those of us who do residential a lot, there's a billion agents. In commercial, there's not a billion agents. And if there are, you only know 5 of them because they do all of the business. But no one's selling a 250-unit apartment building to some rando person with a weak financing. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Exactly. And there's a huge trust aspect to it, too, right? Like, no, there's not 100,000 agents. But, for instance, this is like, on the real estate brokerage side. A lot of times those guys don't even show everybody all the properties that they're marketing because they're like, well, I don't know if you're going to waste my time or not. So I'm going to show it to the guys I know that have executed with me before, because I know I'm going to take this out and they're going to execute. Right? Yeah. Because they have, most of the people in our business have the relationships on both sides, right? You have, either you're like me and you have, your lending relationships and your borrower relationships. Or if you're a syndicator, you have, your operator relationships and then your investors. And, like everybody to a degree, has multiple relationships. And you want to make sure that like you're maintaining trust on both sides. And if you bring somebody on one side that kind of jerks you around and wastes your time, it's going to look bad for the other side.
Yeah, that's a great point. In residential, sure, you have an open house, you get 80 showings in a couple weeks. In commercial, if you do one showing on a $10 million property, the seller is going to want to know everything about that buyer and why you brought them there, just like you said. So the relationship between selling broker and commercial is so much more important than in residential. Of course, it's important in residential, but the stuff goes up on Zillow. Everybody sees it. Half of commercial deals aren't on Crexy. They're going person to person to see like, hey, do you guys want this?
Right. And usually, how it is too. Usually if you see something that's on like LoopNet or Crexy, you're like, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Like they've already gone through their whole list. It's like a wholesale list. Somebody's like, hey, I just got an email from a wholesaler. I think it's a great deal. It's like, if it comes out on email, they've tried to sell it to all of their VIPs and they all don't like it. So you're buying something that's like not as good as what they've already seen.
Exactly. With residential stuff too, man, it's easy to go alone, right? I mean, it's a small equity John check, but like, that's like, I don't know what kind of house you're buying, 100,000 as an investment, but not so easy when it's like a $10 million construct.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, man. Is the best place for people to get in touch with you at cloptoncapital.com?
Yeah, absolutely. Go through our website, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm the easiest person on earth to get in touch with. Always around, so happy to chat.
And you clearly said you, unlike me, answer your phone every time. I never answer my phone.
But I don't even care anymore. My kids are around, I'll still answer. Like, what's up?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That it could be nothing, and then you can just hang up after a couple minutes, or it could be something that turns into a $50 million deal. So
that I had a client that went on like this vacation in Africa, and we were doing a pretty large deal, and she was WhatsApping me at like 3-4 in the morning. I'm like,
time differences.
Okay, I'll still answer, but like, this is going to be a short call. So.
Yeah. Awesome, man. So CloptonCapital.com and LinkedIn, best places to find you then?
That'd be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thanks, John.
All right. That was Jake Clopton of Clopton Capital. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks for sticking around to the end to find out who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. At the end now, I drop these recordings that are new every time, tailored, so you can find out who's coming up next. So on Monday and Thursday morning, you're ready to go. It drops while you're sleeping. You can get to it first thing in the morning. Our guest next episode is Grant Shipman of Livingsmith. Now, Livingsmith is all about co-living, and we're going to go back 20 years into Grant's history to find out how and why he started co-living and where it's taken him since then. This is a very interesting show, and it's really the first intentional co-living situation that we've talked about in depth outside of sober living. So we'll see you next episode for Grant Shipman.